last video we were out learning to get in my dad's car and small tire, and Pat was supposed to be in True Street. I went on the cruise, made the cruise. I was coming back, and it started kind of ticking, and I'm dumb sometimes, so I rolled into it, and Pat set to 30 pounds of boost all the time, you know, because I like to party, and it started knocking really bad. I didn't know what it was. I pulled into the track. I thought it was a flywheel bolt. I was just gonna race anyway. I got talked out of it. So here's where we're at with the car. As you can see, the 6.0 is taken out, and I found, I don't know if y'all can see it, rods aren't supposed to be bent like that, you know, they're supposed to be straight. So what had happened was it bent the rod and started touching the piston to the crank. This bearing got ate up, but yeah, so I got that rod that looks like that. And then that rod's bent. You can see it touched the crank right there. Basically every one that touched the crank is bent. That one is slightly bent, it touched the crank. That one, same thing. So that's where we're at with that. But we were about to start putting the motor back together. I got a set of summit rods, summit pistons, and we're gonna slap it back together and just maybe set it. Well, since we got good rods now, we're probably gonna set it for about 35-40 pounds of boost. So we'll see what happens, but let's get in it. What are you doing?
I am, this is the 6.0 out of Pat. We're actually putting new pistons and rods and rings in it, and there's really nothing major wrong, but I just want to, what they call deglaze the cylinder. It's just a light hone, and it'll just clean up this stuff and give a little extra cross hatching. I mean, if we was really honing it and gonna get serious with it, we would probably be using, you know, a little thicker oil and stuff. But all we're gonna do is just gonna kind of clean it up, and I'm gonna look at it and see what it looks like. I mean, look at that cylinder compared to,
Well, it's brand new
yeah,
compared to that one.
Yeah, and that's all we're gonna do. We're gonna just do a little bit like that. You can get these hones in all different grits. Mike Henson was gracious enough to let us borrow this one, and anyhow, we're gonna just hone it out, and then we're gonna put solvent in it, wash it with water hose, blow it all off with air, and start assembling this thing.
And you just put this steel wire ring, I don't know if you can see it, right into that groove right there. And you just put the piston, put this in, and that's it. What you got going on?
Well, look at this one cylinder. It's got a deep groove in it. I mean, it probably had that, you know, we just probably never noticed it. But
I mean, it is a stock truck 6.0.
I know, like I say, I don't know. I mean, that cylinder's never going to fully seal because of that. The rest of them look really good. I need to get a rag and wipe them out.
Alright, what are we doing?
Alright, well, now we're going to fall fit the ring boost. You've got to give it a little extra ring gap. I mean, a factory pistons anywhere from 16 to 20 thousandths, and that's the gap. Once the ring is in the cylinder, it's what you want to do is put the ring in the cylinder and then kind of square it up with a piston or something that you make up. And then you can see right here, it does have a gap, but it, you know, it's only right there. It's only, these are file fit rings, so and everybody probably does them a little differently. This is a set of Hellfire rings because we're going to be starting on 30 pounds and probably taking this thing to 40 or 50. But so this is a ring filer, and I always recommend checking the ring before you file it, because if you don't, every once, I mean, the last set of rings I had for the Red Dragon, it was my top ring. You know, I was rolling along there, grinding them all the same, setting it, and my top ring, I stuck it without sticking it in the cylinder. I put it up here and spun it 5 times, cleaned it off, stuck it back in the hole, and it was at 50 thousandths. So I always, I mean, it was a learning lesson. It cost me $60 to buy one ring to fix that problem. So always check every single one. This is time consuming, but if you spend time here, it's well worth it. Because if you have too close of a ring gap, when you get a lot of heat in your cylinder, it will lift the ring. Like these will butt up, and there's nowhere for it to go but up, and it'll pop a ring land off. You hear people say it raised the ring lands or whatever, and that's what happens. But anyhow, you want to square it up good. And on the second rings, they're usually softer, so you don't want to do it too much. And like I say, it's what I do is you want to do all 4 corners, so you don't want nothing hanging up. And everybody probably does this different. I mean, if we had an electric ring filer or something, that'd be awesome. But then you just put it back in and you square it up. And I usually like to go, you know, where I can just, you know, it's square right there. And of course, I didn't hardly do anything because we're on this motor. We're going to set the rings at 30, and it's probably at 10. So we got quite a ways to go. But anyway, you just do this. The second ring's soft. The top ring is going to be hard. It's steel, so you got to get a little rougher with it. Also on your rings, some of them have a dot on them, and that's up, always up. And then your paper that comes with them will show, I don't know if this one shows or not, but yeah. If you don't have no dots, but you got a bevel, it goes up. So when the piston comes up, it pushes the ring out and seals. So anyway, they all have a little chart, and you can do street, you know, and it's what you do. You take on this motor, it's 4-inch bore times 7 is 28 thousandths. It's what it recommends for forced induction over 15. So we're going to give it a little extra because we don't want any chances. We're at least going to take it to 30 or 32. So, and we're going to do the top and second ring the same. But basically, what we call loading a piston, like this is number 1 piston. It's the one we was using to square the rings. You put your oil ring on, and you know the gaps. You can see the gap right there. And the main thing with rings, you don't want any of them to line up, but it's what I usually do is I do one side over there like that, and I come on the other side. You just don't want anything lining up.
Why do you want anything lining up?
It's just a chance for oil to blow by. You know, if you see an engine would blow by, like if all the rings lined up perfectly, there'd just be a hole, so it'd be shooting compression through there. So as long as your upper and lower ring are 180 out, and then on your oil ring, you just don't want anything to really line up. Now that the oil ring, the oil control squiggly thing, that gap, I always usually center it and then offset the 2 top and bottom. Again, you got to make sure you're, dot up. This is the second ring. These are like some Hellfire rings or something. That's what they remind me of, those AP rings that we buy. Uh-oh. Got a little carried away there. There's probably a tool for this as well, but anyway, you got to just make sure they're free in there. And then bevel up, because there's no dots on these. And then, okay, and then when you're using H-beam rods and you buy H-series bearings, a lot of people don't tell you this, but if you look on the bearing, it says, this one says upper. So the upper goes on the rod and the lower goes on the rod cap.
How do we find that out?
Well, we was just putting bearings in one day and knocking pistons
in a Ford, right?
In a Ford, and it started getting hard to turn over. It still turned over, and we got most of them in. We had to take it all back apart and put the uppers on the uppers and the lowers on the lowers. That was something that Mike Henson taught me. He said, because I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, I don't know how many engines I built, and maybe I just got lucky every time, but yeah. Anyhow, H-beam, H-series rod bearings, there's an upper and a lower, and it's what it does is there's a big bevel. I'll show you on these rods. If you look at this rod, like on this side, you see there's no bevel.
Yeah.
So it's all the way out to the edge. See that bevel?
Yeah.
And that's the side, like you'll want this to the crank and the other bevel to the crank.
Yeah.
And then the two centers run together. Well, if you put those rod bearings in backwards, sometimes the bearing's so far over it'll rub the sides of the crank, and it just, like I say, you can probably get away with it on some engines. Like I say, that Ford, it did not work, but it was a Ford using Chevy bearings.
Yeah.
What do you expect?
Well, you ready to start knocking this thing together?
Yeah, we just need to, we're going to put the crankshaft in first and get it all torqued, and then we're going to start knocking her together. So. It's looking good. What do you think about that? Huh. It's like something we never used. And we do have. Alright, you ready? Can you guide it from there? Oh, yeah, I should have done that first. Why they don't have these in Allen. I mean, they should be an Allen bolt, you know, is what I think.
One thing worse than the Allen head is a Phillips head. I know you like Allen head bolts, but
I love Allen head bolts till they strip out. But like I say, this one, it's kind of stripped out. Well, that's the bad thing about these Phillips is I don't think they was ever made for something like this. But that's just what
Might probably make one of these.
that's what
Like a kit that.
well,
has
I put a
Allen
little thread locker on them, so hopefully we won't have no troubles.
Alright. Alright, guys. Right now we're in the process of putting the heads on. The heads are just some stock 317, just 6.0 truck heads that I put valve seals and springs in, and then literally that's it. So these LS motors, they're pretty crazy, but just putting some LS9 head gaskets on it right now. They are labeled to which side needs to go to the front. Yeah. Sorry. Dowel pin, dowel pin. Usually I just put a little bit of grease on the head bolts just to keep it all loose and lubed up, and then just run them down, torque them, and then after that we really need to just bolt the intake on, put the rocker arms on and push rods and valve covers, and then we're ready to go back in the car. So we'll see what happens. Alright guys, when you are torquing these head bolts on, you go 1 through 10. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You do the first round at 25 foot-pounds, second round at 50 foot-pounds, and these are ARP head bolts, and then the third round at 75 foot-pounds. And then once you do that, then you go over it again. I always go over it again, yeah, that way I just don't forget something. And then once you do these 10, then you do 11 through 15, torque those to 20 foot-pounds or 25 foot-pounds, and then you're golden. So we're about to do that right now. Alright guys, running the rockers on LS's is super difficult and a hard task. I'm just kidding. It's not. It's the easiest thing you can ever do in your life. I could hand a rocker arm and a impact to my niece or nephew, and they could just tighten it down, and the rocker would be set. So I'm just show you a little bit of what goes into that. Just make sure that the push rod's in the lifter, and then. And they're set. Alright guys, that'll be it. We got this 1200 horsepower LS motor put together. I mean, I know it don't look like much. Got stock intake, stock valve covers, you know, stock water pump, stock balancer. It ain't anything fancy, but it'll make 1200. It's got Summit Pro LS rods and pistons. Before it just had some they didn't have a brand on them. Forged pistons and stock Gen 4 rods. So those can handle 30 pounds of boost. So maybe now that we got good rods, this will handle 40 pounds of boost, you know. So, but that'll be it for today's video. Next video, probably show you a little bit of me putting it in. It's kind of boring whenever you just put a motor in. So I'll show a little bit of putting it in and then starting it up, driving it, stuff like that. So, and then we're back and rolling and racing. So, but that'll be it for today. Like, subscribe. I'll at you later.